hope you all can hear me okay. I've like messed with the volume like probably like 7 times already, and I'm just gonna leave it because I hate messing with audio, and you can probably hear a little bit of tic-tac and stuff like that and background noise, which I do apologize, as I don't think I can get rid of that completely due to the mic that I own. But that's just the thing that's just going to happen, unfortunately, and it's just going to be in the recording as well. But yeah. Just some housekeeping things. If we are recording as well, and I know that a few people popped in just now. Again, we're gonna open this up to questions, so we might go over time for the hour and 15 minutes. I've already gotten permission from Ellie to do so, and we can ask questions at the end, and I will invite you on to raid stage to talk and whatnot, and both Fonce and I will just sort of ask questions as we go, and then we'll pull each person up through and through. But without further ado, we'll just start on time. But my name is Elyse, and a lot of starting in GDS, a lot of people have just been asking me to do this, so I'm very excited, but also incredibly nervous. This seminar is specifically for patch 6.5. As we go on further into the different patch, like through Dawn Trail, like some of the stuff might change transitionally. Some of the stuff will be irrelevant as we have updates throughout the game. But this is currently what's happening in the healer world, and as a healer main. There's a lot of misconceptions that I kind of wanted to rule out and stuff like that, but without further ado, but just know that this session will take about an hour and 15 minutes. And I have my co-healer from my static, Fonce, to like sort of help me with this presentation. So thank you.
Don't worry about it.
Our learning objective will be quite simple. This session will identify transitional dynamic healing over a period of Final Fantasy XIV rating through the different patches affecting healers. So we're going to do a little bit of history check, then follow through with what's happening now. And then we'll introduce high concepts, healing theory, and two terms that you're going to hear quite a lot in this session is co-healer synergy and tangent healing. And then furthermore, I'm going to take that and break that down into FF logs and incorporating data and consideration and what I'm looking for in a prog point, in a prog setting, in terms of healing and all that kind of stuff, and how to improve my gameplay throughout a prog point. And it was just what I'm probably going to talk a lot of this chunk of. And then last but not least, how that applies to you as a person coming into this session. So Fonce, you can give you a brief introduction of who you are to everybody and whatnot.
Yeah, sure. My name is FonceAigle. My first MMO actually started in WoW. I played it for quite a while, since even Vanilla WoW. But around BFA, I attained a Duelist, and I was top 100 Resto Druid in Mythic Plus. And I rated pretty hard, starting around Legion, and got around top 300 around Shadowlands. Then I really got into 14 around the Abyssos tier is when I started raiding. 14 was pretty easy for me to like get into, because even like I know WoW for the most part you're mostly just healed and not really DPS, but when you played at a very high level in WoW, you had to DPS as a healer. It was required. So me getting used to that for 14 was very, very easy. Last year I hit top 100 white mage for quite a bit. And for one fight in particular, I got like rank 16 parse, or 13. Yeah, and then it fell to about 34 at the end. But more specifically, lately, I've been mostly focused more on clearing ultimates and getting parses for that more over the savage. But like I said, it's always been my dream to be the best healer and be able to impart that knowledge onto others and improve other healers. And yeah. So back to you, Elyse.
Thank you. Yeah, no, Fonce is like one of the best healers I know, so I had to like kind of drag him into this. I was like, deal with it. You're coming with me, and he was just like, okay. My name is Elyse Aries, as I mentioned before. I started this game in Oopsies. Echo of the Falling Stars, so patch 5.3. And I fell in love with it. It was my first MMO, so I don't have any other like rating experience or anything like that. I started out as Red Mage, and but one day I was trying to party finder through PF for E5S, and if anyone knows that fight, it's Ramu, and the only spot was open was healer, so I decided I was gonna give a shot at healing. I was absolutely terrible. Failed at healing checks. I can way over my head with healing. And I was told in Party Finder by one of the players I should just quit the game. I cried, but like afterwards, the day after, I was just like, nope, I'm gonna try and be one of the best healers out there, and I'm gonna prove that I got it wrong. So 5 rating tiers later, 3 ultimates, I'm still fucking healing. And trying my very best. It's still a work in progress, obviously. I did try to parse really high in the Abyssal tier, but now I'm just sort of taking it in down low, because I really find that my highlight recently has been teaching, and I just really love that more than trying to parse. So I do have I dip my toes in the parsing community a little bit, but then I also just found that rating and teaching rates was just more satisfactory and more rewarding for me. So that's how I kind of joined GGS. My close friend Cav was like, hey, I'm teaching in this like Discord or whatever, just like, hey, I know you like teaching, this may be something you can consider. And then I'm like, I'm here, and that's why I'm here. And I just like watching people grow and watching people like go from like, I have no idea how to what is a GCD, to all the way to being like clearing and like frogging way faster than I can imagine, and it's so satisfying and amazing. So just a slight disclaimer, while we host this session, like the seminar doesn't have the pretense to be the world's highest authority in endgame healing. I do believe that I am certified, and more like Fonce is more certified, I feel, than I am, but just to teach beginners and intermediate healing some of the ins and outs of what high rating high-end healing looks like, or if you're just looking to get into healing, hopefully that I can help alleviate or help you with that transition, if you're thinking about it towards the end. My goal here today is to organize some information out there into one easy session, and encourage healers to start thinking more deeply about their healing rotation and kit, and hopefully I will see you all on endgame. Sorry, 1 second. With the help of some incredible Final Fantasy XIV players, healers, I have compiled this presentation for you. I hope to dispel any misinformation. It is very common for new healers to have a certain mindset when coming from a different game that causes a lot of misunderstandings in Final Fantasy XIV. So the seminar definitely is aimed to give you more clarity and how healers are designed here. With that being said, whether it is extreme trials, savage, and ultimate, I hope that you walk away today with a little bit more knowledge and understanding to fortify your gameplay. A lot has changed in healing, so we're just going to take a little back trip to how healing was in Stormblood, more so because it dramatically shifted. I mean, it was very different in AR and Heavensward, but Stormblood was a very prominent thing that talking back to a lot of healers, Rinon and some of my healing mentors as well. They were like, talk about Stormblood, because it's one of those things where it was such a dramatic shift to where it is now. And in Stormblood, there was healer stands. I don't know if anyone was playing in Stormlands, but there was a thing called cleric stands, and where healers had to choose between DPSing and the enraged timers for these fights were a lot less toned down. Also, back then, healers had a lot of more complication with their DPS rotations. Scholars, in particular, was one of the examples that they had to manage 5 dots, miasma, arrow, which was the transition from the other role, bio 1, bio 2, all that kind of stuff, right? But as we moved into Shadowbringer and Endwalker, they just got rid of that. They got rid of cleric stance, they got rid of a lot of things, and made the dumb down the simplification of healing or DPS rotation, and increase the healing complexity with their rotation and stuff like that. So you can see that if you looked at points of views or different things throughout the patches, it's definitely changed a lot. And fights back then didn't expect healers to deal significant damage, to beat enraged timers, where now they definitely do. If you have experienced any of these Abyssos or Abyssios, they definitely include the timer into that as well. The enraged timer into that, that's what I mean. So my take on this is that fights were just designed harder, and especially we saw this in Abyssios, where there are more 8-man checks, and they make these fight mechanically harder, while the jobs are, I feel like, and this is talking to every job out there, they made Black Mage rotation a little bit simpler. They reduced the Paladin's rotation to be a little bit simpler, while changing every other class to fit towards the mechanical complexity. They also touched on healer as well, making it just like the 1-button rotation, you know, and with a little bit of a dot every 30 seconds. So that being said, the transition from healing has changed, with the expectation that healing and damaging is part of the enraged timer. And again, it was a really dramatic change from the rating expansions. From the Coils of Bahamut into Endwalker, healers, I didn't have to worry about missing casts or interrupting or their overall contribution. And as the rating community, as us, as player base, we have become ever more better at our jobs, at mechanics, and even more proficient in Savage, Ultimates, and Criterion. So it has been ever more part of Square Enix philosophy to make things a little bit more difficult. And so being a new healer, that can be quite daunting, as you not only have to deal with such high complexity and mechanics, but also now you have to get thrown into some high healing checks, which again, I'm going to help try and relieve those things today. So it is fundamentally very important to go back in time as well, to review some of the basics and to break some of the old habits that we have started. And definitely, I'm talking about from a personal level. When I started healing, I had no fucking clue what I was doing, and so I developed some bad habits. So we're gonna go back, and I know this might be a little bit of redundancy for some of the really high healers that are healer mains here, but again, every mentor that I've ever talked to always says go back to the basics, solidify those basics, and move forward from there. So if you don't know where to start, we're going to start at the basics. So this is just an extra bit, but yes, Final Fantasy, oh, I don't know why that's flashing. Other games are more lenient on the DPS output, but the timer is set where the expectation of tanks and healers contribute approximately 35% of the total DPS with the minimum item level. So that's just something that I just wanted to like point out. So unfortunately, there's a lot of like misconceptions where people were like, oh, but it is very true though. A healer's job primarily has to heal, but it is still very important to go back and and attack the boss now. Now being in Abyssios and in Abyssos, that was part of the DPS contribution. Oopsies. Why did that? Hold on. Oh, sorry. Well, one of my slides kind of got messed up. Interesting. Well, I don't know how that happened. Okay. Well, okay. I was just wondering why it was all, oh shoot. Oh well, we're just gonna roll with it. Anyways, just kind of ignore this. So the first slide I had, I don't know where it disappeared to, but it's always be casting. This is a most important tip, knowing that your slide cast window. And I did have a picture showing the slide cast window, but it has disappeared. So again, I do apologize. Now I'm like slightly panicking and sweating, but that's okay. So just so you know that being able, this term slide cast window is just something that is very common in high-end healing, is knowing the mechanics ahead and sort of pre-positioning for those mechanics. It will give you the absolute benefit by being, like, for example, in P9S for Karmic Succession, Limit Cut 2. Some of you do know what I'm talking about, some of you don't, that's okay. Long story short, if you pre-position close to the middle, you can get shields off. You can also make sure that you will not have the Limit Cut debuff, as the Limit Cut numbers will go off of the furthest most players. Those are little bits of information that probably some of you don't know. But in order for you to get a number, you want to be the furthest away from boss. Numbers require a lot of movement, so as a healer, being close, dead center, underneath the boss's hitbox will prevent me from getting a number, and slide casting that pre-positioning will help me throughout the fight in terms of healing as well, and in terms of, so getting comfortable and practicing slide casting is very important. And just like that, it will give you the most mobility as well. And it obviously there are skills and abilities that will help with those, like, that you can't necessarily be able to slide cast, like Toxicon, Sage of Toxicon, or Rune 2 of Scholars, or like even the dots, or swift casting a GCD and stuff like that is one of those things that we use as healers just for movement. Obviously, you don't want to do that in a prog setting to use your swift cast, but just to know that there is an option when you go into the high ratings scene, that swift cast a GCD spell is still good for movement. The next thing I want to talk about is GCD. As I did say GCD a lot, so it's just known as global cooldowns, and this is often very costly. Global cooldowns is just a GCD term that we use for all classes, by the way, for tanks. Keep your GCD rolling, all your ABCs. This is not an uncommon use, but just think of global cooldowns or off healing in terms of that is often costly, and it's where you need to use all your, you have to think about your OG GCDs, which is your off global cooldown. The difference between the two of them is that think of GCDs are always free but not readily available, and OGCDs are not always available but they are free at no cost of MP. So understanding your healer kits involves the strategic use of OGCDs and GCDs, while primarily you want to use your OGCs first and then supplement those with GCD healing. And so some of the healing that I have pulled from you for today is in this picture here. And I did steal it from a video. I was like, oh, hey, I'm going to steal this from one of the videos, healer videos. Momo, I don't know if you know, he's very famous in healing. and I often follow him and learn a lot from him, so I just stole it from his video, smile. And then often consider your damage neutral heals as also a priority over GCD healing, as damage neutral heals are very, very important in terms of the DPS check that we've already kind of talked about. So that's Sage's Pneuma, those are Astrologians, Macrocosms, and those are Lily White Mages of using their lilies, Afflatus Rapture or Afflatus Slowless, to give them the damage neutral misery. Unfortunately, Scholar, unless it changes in Dawn Trail as like 7.0, Scholar does not have a damage neutral DPS heal. So sorry, Scholars. I'm sure Square Enix will think about you soon, but that being said, so these again, just iterate. These are the cost of heals. Mitigation or healings that cause Scholars. Just do consider Aether Flow as part of their damage, so it's added there. But as you can see, that these are just some of the examples of GCD, or not in the Scholar terms, but in terms of other of the classes. So Aspected Helio, Benefics, all that kind of stuff, Prognosis, Diagnosis, Eucrasia, of those versions of those and whatnot. And then Medica 2, Medica, and Cure 3, and Cure 2. So just think of those. And then this is where the meat and potato of the rotation is. I don't know why that keeps disappearing. But the cost less mitigation heals, which is very, very important in your kit. And it's primarily being comfortable and knowing your class and knowing this is where you want to prioritize your cost less healing. So for healers, that's definitely knowing the difference between those two and being able to strategically place them in certain mechanics and also line them up with your co-healer, which again we'll go through and talk about that, what that really means in cooldowns, in terms of cooldowns and stuff like that. But just again, think of these as freebies, and they are very, very important throughout your kit. So don't be afraid to read your tooltip just a little bit more, just to understand the cooldowns between them and really just get a feel for why the things that are happening. Today in the session, I will not go through individual healers. I do want to say that if that's a question that you want to bring up at the end of the session, specifically for Scholar or for Astrologian or for any of those, we can definitely talk about them. But again, I'm not going to break down each healer because I feel like that requires another 2 hours to do that. So just for time's sakes and whatnot, which we're moving at a pretty good pace here. So last but not least, we're going to go back through basics number 3, and that is dots. So the dots that contribute to healer are just so important. They have a whopping 20% addition to healer damage. And again, I iterate, healer damage is very, very important now in Abyssios and Abyssos, and in Ultimates. If you decide to tail this end into more of a difficulty endgame rating, that this is very, very important. To keep your dot uptime. And dots are considered, if you're not familiar with it, Dia, all the kind of stuff, Bio, now I'm like forgetting the names of the other two off the top of my head, but just know that it is also important that do not redot when the boss is leaving. If you know that he is transitioning or becoming invulnerable due to certain mechanics, and as you, like for example, P9S, he will disappear for scrambling success, which is limit cut 1. So it's important to, if they do not last 30 seconds, do not redot, as it is better for you to do your GCD heal. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. I know that personally I have a bad habit of redotting and then the boss leaves and I'm just like great. But again, long story short, is also to just keep in the back of your mind as well. When you do high-end content, there's also a benefit to knowing your AOE gain or no gain ability. For sages and scholars, Dyscrasia and Ardibor is a gain on 2 more targets. So if you're doing which is again the Epic of Alexander, one of the ultimates that came out in Shadowbringer. They present two bosses, BJ and CC, Brute Justice and Cruise Chaser. So they will show up at the same time, and oftentimes if they are together and beside each other, it is important for be in accounting for your damage as well, and to especially if you're a sage or a scholar, to Disgracia or Art of War. But for white mages and Astrologian, the gain is actually on 3 or more targets. This is pertinent to some of the ad phase of the fights, but most commonly not used at all as well. So just so you know that these are kind of a little bit of extra considerations to go. Another extra consideration is additional marks. So this is something that I think we do have a little bit of time to talk about, because I was just kind of worried. I didn't make a slide for this, but long story short, high parsing healing, you do want to try and consider auto attacks. So auto attacks are occurring when you are close to a box and in max melee. And this seems ridiculous, but auto attacks still account for your damage. It's very small, but it can be, if you're in the boss's hitbox, you will do a little bit of auto damage, the weakest will be about 0.04, as our auto damage sucks as healers. But if you are considering high-end parsing, in the 99s, in the 100s, you might want to consider it. Now, there are certain mechanics where you have to reserve that spot for melee DPS or tanks DPS, as they need to be inside the boss hitbox, and you can't auto attack, because that is just how it is. But that is also something that you want to consider in additional, if you end up doing high-end parsing, is that the auto attacks may make or break a difference between a 99% and 100%. When I was trying to, I guess, parse a long time, like in a Basios, I was just pulling up the logs. I'm like, we're literally doing the exact same thing, GCD wise and stuff like that. And then I looked, and the top parser for healers was literally doing 50 more autos attacked than I was. And I was just like, damn it. I was like, this is something that I have to consider in terms of trying to be the best. So that's also something as well. And last but not least is something I also want to talk about is MP economy and management. Try to be very comfortable with your lucid dreaming. As high-end healing goes on, when people start dying and stuff like that, and if you yes, and thanks, Fonce, for correcting that as well. Try and start your lucid dreaming about 700 MP, not at the very beginning, and then on cooldown. Oftentimes, when I was talking to my rating mentor, healing as well, Tom, he also recommended me to, because I had a horrible time remembering hitting my lucid dreaming, is that lucid dreaming is a 30-second cooldown, or 60-second cooldown, apologies, and he said that just try and time it with your dot. You know that your dot's a weave, so every time you dot the second time, your lucid dreaming should be up. So he just said, this is a little bit tidbit to help. But generally at 70% is when you want to start. So usually after the opener or your second dot is when you are about at 70%. So that is kind of how, yeah, all right. We're going to do another session, or another topic that is very common, and something that a lot of new healers will not be familiar of. So this is in terms of understanding how high-end rating works, is that not all damage are considered the same. Not all mechs hit the same way. Not all raid wides are treated the same way. So barrier healers, listen very well to this section, because the barrier healers have the most planning out mitigation in certain raid wides. So if you're a berry healer, sit down, hold your, drink a cup of coffee, because this is more so to you. As pure healers are still listening in, Bear, this is why this is so important. In Abyssios in particularly, it is very, very, very funny that now that the raid wide damage, like that you saw, like ravaging in P9S, is actually one of the lower end hitting attacks, unavoidable attacks. And that's the same thing if you go into P12S Part 2. Ultima, while it still really, really hurts unmitigated, it is still the least lethal of raid wide out of all of them, right? Considering like Pangenesis or any of those big mechanics at P12S. But there are two incredibly things that are, and also tank busters will change in terms of fight as you get further on into the raid tier. Tank busters will require way more mitigation, way more weaving, or the term we use is kitchen sinking, by putting all their mitts into that tank buster, because it really does hurt. But there are two things to really understand is damage variance and damage actors. Now, I don't know if you know, but there are two types of damage. One magical and one physical, affecting party members differently. And this is very, very important as a healer to know. If you have a minimum item level squishy caster, they might need a little bit more protection in order for them to survive the mechanic or raid wide. So this is something that you want to take note of, your minimum item level folks, as they will need a little bit more babied in certain mechanics. This is just a other note that maiming gear is just known to be higher resistant in physical damage, and casting gear still are known to have higher resistance to magical damage. So these variants are really differing on gear as well as the type of class they are. Whether if the raid wides are usually magical, by the way. Usually, I say usually, but like there are some cases where the raid wide is physical, like Harrowing Hell is a physical raid wide damage. And so a lot of mitigations like Dark Mind, Heart of Light, that are magical resistance from tanks are not included. So this is very important to know when you're progging with either PF or static, to know the difference between the two, because they do not affect it as well. And therefore, Harrowing Hell is very, very, very difficult on squishy casters. I learned that very early on when we were progging the tier, that my poor red mage kept dying, and I was just like, why? But it will slightly change based off of your gear item level as well, and this is something to account for. Somebody versus, like, for example, Bith level red mage versus a squishy red mage. Not only the health pool is different, but also they take lesser damage the more higher item level that they are. So damage variance it's not about, back then in Stormblood, I think that one of the things we're talking about were the boss critting. That's not a thing in Abyssios, and the attacks don't crit. It's just there is a set damage based off of gear level and variance. With that, knowing those two is really important. On the same topic, we want to talk about damage actors, which is really something that a lot of people don't know. So, damage actors are not necessarily just attacks that are coming from the boss. And this is something that where mitigations such as reprisal, feint, and addo will not affect the attack. Another thing to note for damage actors that is not mentioned in the slide here, that there is special damage that Square Enix, which comes as a green icon. And special damage are, again, meaning unmittable. So, if you ever done Zero Mess, and there's an acceleration bomb. I know that some people haven't done the fight, but that's okay. There's an acceleration bomb that ticks in the middle of it. That, when you fail that acceleration bomb check, that is unmitigated damage. It's called special damage. So no matter what's, like, if you have a 10% reduction, like a bubble of any sort, like sacred soil, it won't affect that. It will be, or like if you try and like ablation yourself or aquaveil yourself, that, and for that ticking damage, it will not. It's yeah, it will not affect that as well. The only thing that will prevent you from getting less of a damage for that acceleration bomb is a shield, so a TBN or a aspected, or a divine benison from a white mage and stuff like that, or celestial intersection and whatnot. So those are the things that will sort of prevent it, but again, they are darkness damage, or just I'm losing my words. English is hard, but basically those can't be mitigated. So if you ever see that, if you ever walk into a wall and see that you just take a certain flat damage because it's unmitigated, that's what I mean by special damage. So that is also something to add as well. So in terms of damage after as well, going back to it, there are a lot of fights. There are other things that not necessarily they're considered adds, but the damage proximity comes from somewhere else. So in P12S, if you've ever done UAVs or any of part 2 stuff, or in part 1 even, if you ever done any of my learning parties, I say beware of women. Because of the ads that spawn on the side, they're untargetable. So you can't hit Addo Feint on any of them. But not that you can, but you can easily dodge them. But they do not. If you Addo Feint the main boss, which is Athena, they do not change in damage. You'll still receive that damage down. The damage will be the same, and you will just cry because that damage down really, really does hurt. But that's the same thing. An example that I have here in the slide is the comets falling in P9S. So that is also proximity damage again, coming from the comets, but understanding this and utilizing party mist such as Shake It Off, Shield Zama, Magic Barrier will be AoE is more appropriate for the damage actors of those cases, because again, Reprisal Feint and Addo will be useless for those. So those are always something to keep in mind as well. Alright, before we jump into FF logs, we're running along real smoothly. I know that it was a little bit of extra stuff and a lot of information overload. So let's just get bound to the theories of healing. Healing is always a puzzle, and I always want to start that off, is that healing is not just for, especially in this endgame fight, it's not just for healers to resolve. It's for the healers and the rest of the party. If 30% healing does the job, it is very important to not try and do more. And we already discussed the importance of healer damage, and optimizing it as you would, and knowing that kit, and to reduce that as much as possible over healing. In a prog setting, that might be a little bit difficult, but that's where you're working towards with your team, your static, in Party Finder, and whatnot. So the two things I really want to talk about right before we dive into reading logs, and because they pertain to reading logs as well, is something that in my time playing this game and healing with many healers is the understanding of the two healer theories, and one of them is co-healer synergy. Co-healer synergy is between two healers that innately know what their co-healer is doing, specifically during healer checks to provide effective healing results while reducing overhealing. It is having the combination knowledge that comes from damage variance, right? Fight timeline, and this encompass a very powerful healing that optimized healing. So now it is so what does that all mean? It just means that you don't want to dump all your healing kit into one mechanic and then have nothing else for the next healing check, right? As we know that cooldowns are very, very sparse and different. This is talking about costless. When I'm specifically talking about costless. Now, oftentimes when you're progging you're not comfortable with the fight, and that's where you use your cost less healing, and then you're going to dip into your costly healing, your GCD healings and stuff like that, and that often happens a lot in Prague. So understanding where your cooldowns are coming off of and understanding what your co-healer is doing is really, really important. And often, and this is very achievable by knowing, by doing one thing, even if you don't know what your co-healer is doing, and that is by communication. And that is hard in Party Finder, but feel free, just like tanks talk about how they're going to handle tank busters, feel free to always talk about when I go into P11S, because the healing ramps up in P11S. There are double the amount of healing in P11S than P9. So it is, I always start my P11S when I progged is, when are you using, if my co-healer is a Sage or a White Mage, I say, when are you using Bell? When are you using Macrocosms? When are you using Panheima? All those sort of things, so I can know when their cooldowns is, and then kind of finagle my kit into that as well. And so being able to understand that, okay, I'm gonna help them with this mechanic because their Bell's there, but I'm going to reserve my biggest healing kit, my like Jury. I know that Jury hits for a lot of damage, so I'm going to move my crit at low shields to Jury, and because they're going to handle the first raid wide with Bell. You know, all those things are encompassing how, and that's just simply communication, right? Being very vocal about your communication. Oftentimes, that is the number one thing when I ask to review somebody's logs. It's like, what is going on? What is happening? I feel like I'm overhealing and my co-healer's not doing enough, right? And oftentimes I go through these logs and I'm like, and I ask the question, well, what did you say to them? Do you have a set mid plan? Like, are you guys talking it out? And I would say 80% of the time people say, well, no, we haven't really talked. My other co-healer's really quiet, blah, 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 blah. And so it gets, and then it gets really difficult, right? It's a team effort where a lot of times you have to ask, like, hey, healing is struggling here. So you have to still ask the other party, tanks and DPS, hey, can you make sure you feint in this raid wide? Can you make sure that you shake it off during here? And those are something that you have to consider as healers, because oftentimes the damn DPS don't really know what to mitigate, what hits harder, what doesn't hit harder, where is feint needed. And you find that very, very prominent towards the end of the tier, where in P12S Part 2, you cannot dump all your mitigations on the first raid wide, because you will have no mitigations for the second parts of the attack. So staggering, being able to coordinate and staggering those gets really fun. In my opinion, it's super fun. And so it's also can be super frustrating, and I understand that. Healing with many different healers throughout my game through, but yeah, it's just a matter of coordination and communicating what you need and what the party needs and whatnot. And that's a tricky thing sometimes with Party Finder, and it's a tricky thing sometimes even in statics. So trust me, it is just a learning curve as we all get better raiders every single day. So the next thing I want to talk about is tangent healing. And already co-healing dips into tangent healing, but tangent healing is aligning specifically one's cooldowns, and just know that every healer's kit comes either in a 2-minute cooldown or 3-minute cooldown. For example, and this is something that you may not know, or you do know already, that this pure healers often have a 3-minute cooldown. So that's Bell, that's Macrocosm, that's the 180 seconds cooldown. And so that is very, very different. Whereas shield healers like Sage and Scholar Crit Lat Low Shield, Expedient are all on the 2-minute window, and Panheima is on the 2-minute window. So if you look into your kit, knowing the big cooldowns and knowing how that fits in a fight is really important, and knowing that of your co-healer too. So that's why I said in the very beginning, I usually ask, hey, when do you have bell down? Okay, I'm going to move my Panheima not on the raid wide, but onto the sticks after in a P11S. So knowing that I can't cover the raid wide and the sticks with Panheima, but trusting your healer to and that, again, I always say this, that can be hard, right? That can get hard in Party Finder. I've experienced it firsthand, don't worry. I've experienced solo healing, and I experienced that, and when you get into high-end parsing, you have to be comfortable in solo healing, right? So that's how you, one person healer stacks to bolster somebody's number, but that's just extra. Those are extra. But again, those can be hard when you find those tangent healings and stuff like that. So with tangent healing, it's a little bit different. It's very more specific to that's the healer's responsibility. Tangent healing is not necessarily used for all fights, and this is something that I really want to iterate. Tangent healing is also giving the responsibility to somebody else. Hey, you're going to take care of this mechanic, and I'm going to take care of this mechanic. So tangent healing shows up on FF logs as like up and down. So I'll show you what that looks like in FF logs. I've tangent healed with somebody, and then I have code healed synergy with somebody where we just do exactly even amount of healing, but both healers contribute. So that is something that I really want to show, that there's a difference healer theorem, and how you can, again, solve these healing puzzles together with your party and with other healers as well. Again, side note, it is possible when you are Abyss to solo heal every fight for parsing reasons. But again, I'm not going to use this seminar to talk about parsing, to talk about solo healing. Is that something you're interested in? I can definitely feel like I can write like a 2-hour seminar on parsing alone. So, but it's something that a lot of the seminar is not going to touch on about specifically. But again, that's something that we need to look into. Ranking, what am I looking at a parse log? What am I looking in ranking and all-star points and all that kind of stuff? I don't want to go into too much details of it, but you kind of get the gist of it. There is another world out there that considers all those, right? And that changes a lot of the stuff that I want to talk about here today. So, all right. So now to assess how well healer synergy, I'm going to quickly go into FF logs here. So pardon my transition here. Okay, what do I have here? Okay, the first thing I want to talk about, I hope you can all see that. Just gonna quickly, this is a previous log, so this is Abyssios, by the way. Sorry, Abyssos, by the way. So just, you do note that it's a little bit different. The tier was a little bit different here. So this is a log of a fight that we cleared on this as well. And you can kind of see here that Senna is my co-healer here. But what I really want to look at right here is the healing parse here. And you will notice that our healing parse is relatively, so ignore this parse number, because a lot of times parse is based on the class specifically, what they're doing and stuff like that. So kind of ignore this left side, okay? What I'm really looking at is this heals per second and how close you can get with co-healer synergy. This is really important, how much he's doing, how much I'm doing, and how close we can get that number, and to reduce that damage overall. I do believe he dies in this, so his damage is pretty low. But anyways, that's not the point. While we're looking at this, it is very important to check this overheals number. Now, this is the caveat though. Pure healers will unfortunately have a lot of overheal problems. It is very important with star and size, as they need to be placed on cooldown because they are damage effective. Again, we talked about damage being very, very important, that you will often see pure healers will overheal way too much, right? But if your number is less than 50, I think that's still good. For shield healers, you want your number to be less than 30%, which is good. But this overall is also something that we kind of have to take into consideration as well. But to really, if you're a visual person, this will really help. So when you are looking at these logs, right, these are the heals per seconds combined, by the way. But you can click on this, and you can see how close they are to this line. So Senna's, if you can see, he's highlighted in purple there, and you can see that his healing is quite close to that as well. If you click on mine, oopsies, that is not what I wanted to do. Okay, if you see where mine lines up as well in the white, it is very close to that middle line. So this is a visualization of where you can see where the healing is very, very close and the healing changes quite a bit. I want to reiterate, Final FF Logs is truly amazing. There's a little tab where you're kind of like, oh, healing, absorb, mitigation, and overhealing. Click on this, and you'll see that there's a difference in overhealing. So raw healing is the bottom number, top healing is the over number, and obviously the bigger the gap is, right? The bigger the gap is the overhealing that occurred of that instance. So what was needed and what was not needed. And just by the basis show that there were certain healer checks that were overhealed. And oftentimes so this chunk here, and if you need a little bit of math, I do understand that it can be hard. It was hard for me when I first did it, but you see that this portion here was about like a huge difference, a 15k overheal difference here, right? And so that's something that you can sort of zoom in to that timeline and saying, what are we doing here? What is going on here? Why are we overhealing here? And something that, what can we do as a healing puzzle? What can we do to sort of fix that, right? So this was at the 6-minute window, and I forget this fight, but I think this is high concept too, where we're just like overhealing a bunch. Sometimes there's a lot of downtime to consider, so we're just dumping all the heals that we can because we have the downtime to do it. So this, in that consideration, is always okay, right? Think about the downtime, think about what you need to do, all that kind of stuff, because not all overhealings, depending on the downtime, is necessarily bad, but you don't want to make sure that you spam all your GC heals and then you have no mana left, right? If everyone's full and topped up, stop spamming heals. Stop, and then this is why I iterate all the time, and I hate this, but white mages are notoriously bad for spamming Medica too, when everyone's fully health, and I don't know why, it just bothers me so much. It's just this sages always spamming prognosis or whatever, just continually spamming a heals when everyone's topped up. That gets a little bit difficult because now you've dumped all your mana reserve and you can't do Dominion, which is the final part of the fight, right? So be very cognitive of your GCD healings during those downtimes, as they are very, very important because you need the mana for the next healing check. So that's super, super, super important. So as you can see, we're going to go through this timeline. This is a downtime. This is also the area of downtime. So this is at the 5 minutes 30. You can see that this highlights the downtime between high concept 1 and high concept 2, and it's red here. So this is the downtime I'm talking about. We kind of overhealed a little bit here and whatnot. So this is also good to look at the timeline. So at the 6-minute mark, when high concept ends, we can look at timelines. So what are we doing in this timeline, right? And you can, if you hit the timeline tab, which is really something that I use a lot to diagnose what's going on, and then we have to scroll at this very bottom here. I know it's quite tedious, but you get the kind of the picture. You go to the 6-minute mark and see what I'm doing. Oh, I overhealed. So the fault was mine. I overhealed with a Flatus Rapture. So you can kind of see that 6-minute mark is partly my fault. But I think I mostly did it to gain an extra misery, because you can have double misery out of that transition there, and that's a white mage nuance, by the way. So that's something that, why am I doing this? what is it accounting for, and all that kind of stuff. And then we reopen. So that plays misery caused that definitely caused that overhealing there during that part as well. So just something that you can kind of figure out what's going on. This little icon, I will say that it is so every fight you will have a auto regen. This is an auto regen and server tick. So if you see this icon a lot, don't be alarmed. You're just auto regenning here. So this is the regen tick, and that ticked for 184k on Lily Fiona. So just FYI, you'll see this so much throughout the fight. As long as you're not taking damage, you'll see this all the time in the fight as the fight goes on. So that little icon here. And again, you can scroll down and see how much it heals for, you know, and can kind of do the math there, right? Okay, so I'm gonna pull up another log. So we're done with Oopsies. I didn't want to close that, but I guess I closed it. Anyways. Oh, okay. This is the one I did with Fonce. Hi, Fonce. Thanks, Fonce. I didn't tell you I was pulling this log, but this is, again, our overheals are 30. That's good. We're looking at this. This can be better, but we're very comfortable with our kit, and I will usually blame this one myself. Sometimes when I'm re-clearing, I just do like, I know what Fonce is doing, and then I just do whatever, and I'm not worried about the healing afterwards, right? So this is one with Fonce and I just want to show you that this is definitely overhealing. But if you look at our going back to damage, our damage is pretty high. Looking at our damage, we are contributing together the damage difference here. So it's one of those things where, yes, I'm overhealing, but I'm often overhealing with a lot of free stuff, right? So, but it still works out because our damage is quite high within each other, right? And I do believe you die in this one, Fonce. No, Beast does. But anyways, so this is something that to consider as well. Again, don't look at this left side. This left side is based off all parses. And again, if we're really focusing on the parse logs, we can talk about this number. But right now, I'm looking at specifically this DPS and our DPS, right? So these are the numbers I'm looking at. The closer we are to DPS together, the closer also is contributing for the synergy as well, and whatnot. So as you can see here, this is an example of overhealing, massive overhealing that happened. So you can see from this is a lot more greener and a lot less thin, right? And again, I'm contributing to most of it as well because I'm not looking at this part per se, but I'm looking at this raw healing and healing difference here, right? So a lot of times my overhealing is, but the good thing about this though is that we are still below that requirement. He's below 50. Again, he needs to dump lilies to make sure that he has a misery, right, as well, but I'm making sure that he's having a little bit of less overhealing, and then making sure my overhealing is a little bit less too. So that's also something to consider as well. Alright, that is mainly the breakdown of those things. I did want to pull out. So oftentimes when you're progging, because this is more prog focused, because I wanted to talk about healing as a more prog focus. The last thing is not all deaths. Understanding and diagnosing death. So when a player dies, it's not always a healing issue. Deaths are not as simple as they seem. There are multiple reasons why somebody's at fault for an individual death. And oftentimes, I get this very common, it's probably the healer's fault. You didn't heal enough, blah, 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 blah. And so, honestly, that frustrates me because that's not necessarily true. So, we're going to use FF logs to dive into what happened to that person. And I should have used it. So, in this parse that I pulled up here is Beast. Beast died. So his parse is super low. Sorry, Beast. If you're listening to this recording after, don't hate me. Anyways, so we're gonna go into the death tab. to see why he died. Now, first thing first, I want to always look at damage taken, right? Damage taken is usually the sole indicator that the person could be standing in the wrong spot. They could take a bait where they double bait, where they're not supposed to. All these things to consider. By knowing the fight and knowing how well, you can look at why did that person die, right? And being comfortable with these tabs and stuff like that really does help as well. So, first off, I know that it's not a healer problem, and the first thing I know why is this damage taken. It's 141k. No tank currently of this tier can even take that kind of damage, so you can kind of see that this damage taken was not. We can go through the details of how he occurred that by going back through time and looking at the replay, but first off, when I want to look at a parse or log and stuff like that to see what's going on, right, I do that. And it's something that I do quite often during limit cut. People are like, was there not enough healing in P12S limit cut? People always ask me, oh, was there not enough healing? And I will go in and I'll look at the damage taken, and they are either standing too close and they're taking way more damage than they should, and then they die, right? And I often say, actually, it's not a healing issue, but it's a player positioning issue where they're taking so much damage. And the good indicator of that is looking at this overall damage taken, right? And he took a lot of damage here. And this is the healing he received in between, right? So when you're diagnosing these problems and these deaths, it's really important to you can click on the player to show more of an in-depth knowledge of what happened. So I'm going to click on Beast here, and you can kind of see the timeline, right? This is the death. So just work this way backwards, right? He got a heal here by me, right? Also, this is also something to note, that if there was any mitigation or lack of food, you can kind of see it here. He was well fed. He did use his last usage is third eye. He didn't use it there, but it's a minus 50 seconds there. So you can kind of see what mitigations were placed on him, right? As in addition to contribute to the damage as well. So, as well as he received multiple heals. So you can click on this tab, and you can see that he got a Jericho, which I tried to save him, and he unfortunately took too much damage. So he took damage here, and then he took damage here. This is quite, like, this is how much damage in total he took. So he wasn't supposed to take a damage some point, but he died anyway. So we're going to go into, so he died around the let's see here, actually, where did he die? So he died around the 7 minutes and 39 seconds is when he just died. So we're gonna go into, this is a really powerful tool. It's the replay function. Why did he die? So I know this is the bar, right, of where we start, but you can kind of see what everyone is doing during the time, and you can also click on that person to see their cast time, which is really important. So we're gonna click on Beast. So this is really, really cool. I love this function so much to diagnose what's going on during a pull. This is very important during prog. While I'm recording during a prog point, when we're progging this tier, I'm also looking at what's happening. And this is also the parse with reclays with further, so I apologize. Anyways, so you can see this is where Beast is. We're gonna zoom past. You can also see very specifically what he's doing, and this, by the way, is the auto attack. So this is something that you want to kind of consider high parsing. But anyways, so we're gonna go to that 7 minute and 39 mark. So we're stacked up for UAV 2, and then we're breaking apart here for the chains, and he is going to die here. So he's kind of spreading. We do this spreading for UAV2 that's happening here, and he's standing way too close to one of the beams. In 2 seconds, he's gonna die because he got shot by the beam. So this is also a good thing to look at back damage actors. So these damage actors, as the ads spawn, they're shooting through the arena. This is where the boss is, right? Unmitigated, right? You can't reprisal any of these ads, right? But it shot him. So this one shot him, and he died immediately because I tried to save him, but because he was too far out for that spread. He needed to wait just a hair second, and then he died to that raid Y. So, not always it is a damage fault from the healers, but this is oftentimes, yes. Or what we can find out with this replay button, which is really amazing, what occurred leading to this damage. And so it will help you understand, and your team to understand, or static, to help what we need to do from negation, even extra healing, or even pre-positioning, right? And to make informed choices in the next pool. Alright, we're kind of getting really, really close to the end. I'm trying to keep it as close as I can to, so we can open it up for questions towards the end as well. We're kind of getting close to it. I did want to talk a little bit more about reading FF logs and stuff like that, but this is just the general sense, right? Everyone knows that you can plug these things into analysis, right? And this will also help you with understanding timelines as well. I'm going to try and quickly do this because I kind of screwed this up. So, timelines are very important. As a new healer, I want to reiterate that analysis is not always a good thing. Oh, shoot. Sorry, Fonce. I will pick mine.
No, that's fine. You could use mine too if you want to.
So, this is the very beginning where we talked about always be casting ABCs, right? As you can see, my ABCs was not very good in this fight, especially and you can look very importantly why that happens is, looks like I had lots of weaving issues. Again, I'm not gonna say I'm the greatest healer out there yet. I'm still working on it. But this ABC, if you want to look at it from an analysis point of view, right, is something that you want to definitely consider. Because again, this is like a mantra. You're gonna, healer damage is important. Yay! You're all gonna say with me at the end of this session, healer damage is important. My ABCs wasn't good. You can see that it's very red. Very not good, but that kind of happens. And one of the things that I look at is this weaving issue. Obviously, I did kind of fucked up with the weaving issue here, and it's something that I constantly work on too sometimes, is the weaving issue, especially for sages as well, and that would consider with my ABCs. You can also check your ABCs by going down to this timeline. You can do this for FS logs too, by the way, is you can check this timeline and see if there are gaps between these. So you can go through and see what the fuck went wrong. Oh, I have a gap here. That's an incorrect weave. You can kind of see that, there's one of my things. What was I doing here in the 3-minute whatever, right? So you can kind of piece the puzzle together. Oh, I kind of fucked up. Oh, I must have been in the wrong spot because I Icarused. So, this is a gap here, so very, very poor of that as well. Again, I wanted to use my example because I know that this wasn't a very good pull for me. But long story short, I raised somebody here. I focused more on the healing. So you can see where this part, I'm just trying to recover. My damage is important as well, but at this time, I wanted to recover the fight. So I raised Beast in this pool. This is the same fight as P12. There's a raid white happening as well, and so I just wanted to recover that as well, and all that kind of stuff. So you can see where oftentimes that healers do need to kind of contribute more healing and focus more on that, because the next mechanic that was coming up in that fight was an 8-man check, and I needed him alive. I needed Beast alive, so my stopped casting, interrupted, and then raised him. So this is a good thing here.
Hey.
Yeah, sorry, I'm in the middle of something. What's up?
Can you hold it?
I know, I'm just...
I need to go to pick up my car.
Your thing cut out completely.
Can you give me 2 seconds?
2 seconds?
Can you give me, another 10 minutes? 10 minutes. Okay. Sorry, my husband was talking to me real quick. Alright, another thing I wanted to quickly talk about here is obviously the whole overhealing and using cooldowns. Overhealing, honestly, FF logs, this is what's a little bit frustrating with FF logs, is that FF logs is like, oh, you didn't use this, or A, you didn't use that, or you let it expire. In 4 stages, that's not always the case. If I don't need it, right, we talked about that earlier, if I don't need it, I can use it for somewhere else, and not all the times that given the example and the situation, sometimes I don't need it. Also, so just take this with a grain of salt. Always be thorough and looking through, did I actually need it, do I not actually need it, and oftentimes I find that I don't actually need certain things, right? So FFLogs would be like, oh, you didn't do this right, you didn't do that right. Which, again, the ABCs is something that you can't hardly negotiate, because that's probably something that you definitely need to improve. But the overhealing portion can kind of be like, well, do I really need it for this fight? And oftentimes when I go back to P9S, my overhealing is like in the boots. It's like kind of like up here, because it's P9S is considered an introductory fight. So try and use analysis of more of a guideline in terms of that. But really, analysis is what is really good with analysis is that ABC. It really points that out really, really well, and then you can kind of see why it happened and stuff like that. So that's the main portion I want to take from analysis. All right. We are going back. Oops, that's my character. Where it is my stuff. Uh-oh. I think I accidentally... Hold on. Panic mode. Okay, I accidentally closed my thing. You always try and do a presentation and then it always kind of like fucks up. So, alright. We're gonna end this little tidbit because, again, want to give you again, I hope that kind of briefly talks about a lot of things, maybe some questions, maybe investors more questions, and I do apologize, but that's why we're gonna open it up to more questions during the end. Fonce and I will try and alleviate, and there's gonna be some questions that maybe we won't know the answers to again, but I hope that this was fun and at least a little bit more informative on how you should review those logs and start thinking about the whole picture and whatnot and combining those things together. I love this thing because I'm like, yes, I understand, that's the why when I first started healing, and Tom was like, here's what I would do, and then he would send me paragraph and paragraph, and I'm like, and then I would always reply with, yes, I totally understand, and I'd be like, no, I don't understand. So, and then it would just take me many months to be like, oh, this makes sense, So it's time to prove yourself with healers. I will say that it is, whoopsies, I will say that this, though, it will take time. It takes a lot of time. It took me a lot of 3 or 4 years to kind of hone my craft. I'm still currently honing it. And it's something that just always be in a state of improvement is my tidbit and my encouragement. And as time will change, the healing will evolve and will be different. And who knows, Dawn Trail might introduce a new concept of healing, and all this, whatever I talked about, is down the drain. So just always keep it in the back of your mind as well. I just want to do a quick thank you. Last but not least, a quick thank you to Kane and the rest of GGS Discord for letting me do this, and some of my friends here as well that kind of helped me through with this presentation and my static and and whatnot. So I think we're early because I kind of wanted to speed through a little bit of it, but yeah, I'm going to, that's kind of how it is towards the end. We're gonna, any Fonce, you want to add anything a little bit? I know that you've been like kind of messaging throughout the chat as well, which I do appreciate.
Yeah, I've been pretty efficient. I've been already answering questions, so.
Yeah.
I mean, like, the only thing I would maybe add, because I've been told by someone to possibly add this, but mostly, like, just attitude about, like, how you look, like, especially when you're progressing a fight, not to, I know, like, I'm the biggest, I guess, hypocrite in a way, but try not to get too overwhelmed, especially like angry, upset, or especially at other people, because I mean, everyone, like that saying, you go into a party with 7 clowns, and you figure out you're the 8th one, so everybody makes mistakes, so you have to like really, think of just like mostly because you really can't, especially when you're in PF, you really can't change anybody else, but you can change yourself. So that's what you focus on yourself. So you constantly look at logs, analysis, say, what can I do better, in the next pool? Can I, could I slid casted better so I don't miss a GC here? Could I have, done a heal differently so I don't have to resort to GC healing? You need to really look into that, and you'll improve over time with more and more practice. So that's what I say. You want to kind of keep a good attitude, so you're more focused on trying to improve rather than what's happening in the very moment. So, and like I said, people make mistakes all the time. Like, I mean, it's not, for the most part, people are actually trying to act, and they're not trolling you on purpose. Usually it's ignorance that will end up killing you, not because someone's malicious or whatever. So
Yeah.
you have to keep a clear head and think about it.
Yeah. And a lot of things that were iterated by Deep and Ellie and even you is that there's a lot of stuff to talk about when you are learning to heal and get better and whatnot, and focus on the one thing, improve that, then the next thing, improve that, and that's why it takes time, right? You can't get from new to the best healer all in one go, right? And even then, I say, like, I'm still working on it as well. So it's definitely something that I say definitely a lot. I feel so stupid, but long story short, it'll take time, and don't beat yourself up, and just take it day by day. Recovery, yeah. So we're gonna open it up to some questions here. I need to fix that raise stage. Deep likes to talk. You can come talk. I'm sure you can just come on.
One more thing I want to add, because he had mentioned it. So it's in the recording instead of just the chat. Gravity for Astro is always a gain on 2 targets, no matter the level.
Oh, sorry. I screwed it up then. There you go. All right. Hi, Deep.
Hello. Yeah, so first of all, great presentation. You guys are awesome. Well, I learned a lot. So my question is, how would you recommend approaching a new fight as a healer? Like, let's say, whether or not there's guides out, like, how do I approach the fight and figure out when I should be using all of my cost less heals, like you said?
So it kind of depends on how you do. Do you do it blind? Do you like to do it with a timeline? If you like to do it with a timeline, you can kind of see from different points of views and stuff like that, what other people are doing. I know it feels like it's cheating, quote unquote, but it definitely can help a new healer, especially. If you like to do it blind, my thing when I do things kind of blind and on my own is I have a battle log, and this is something that I personally do, is I have a battle log on this type. So I'm gonna go to my FF logs here, and you can kind of see it's on the very top here. So I personally, I'm gonna just show you real quick. This battle log, I filtered everything out based off damage, and you can obviously see that the damage here. So when I'm early progging and early parsing, I look at this. Oh, sorry, it's a bad picture. But I look at this damage log and what it tells me. Is it magical? Is it unmitigated? Is it physical? How much does it hurt? How hard does it hurt? And then I have little notes when I prog as well, to say, oh, this fucking hurts. So I knew when we first did Harrowing Hell, it hit 151k. And we just all died because the damage log, and this is before you'll have like extra things like death recap or whatever third-party tools to help you with that. But it definitely shows right in this log here that we took 151k on that hit, right? So like when I was early, and it was a physical damage. So we, as a static, we just changed everything. Okay, we're not going to use Dark Missionary here. Our tank actually switched to a warrior in one of our prog points because we were like, we want to really like have some healing puzzle to resolve it. So I actually, because of that, we saw that checkpoint, of Harrowing Hell, I went back to my timeline and knowing what happened, and I changed my entire mid plan because of that Harrowing Hell, because I wanted everything to line up to that Harrowing Hell point, which is at the roughly at the 7 minute mark, right? So when you are a new healer, my tidbit or my nuance for how I do things is going back and seeing what hits the hardest, and oftentimes you'll have times where you'll like change everything. You prog a fight, and then all of a sudden that happened, and I'm like, fuck. And then I go back and wipe my thing. Okay, I want this cooldown, and then you just work on reprogging a little bit towards that point. So when you get to those healing checks, that you'll have everything that you planned for it and whatnot. So that is my planning for the OGCDs, and then on top of that, if you really need a little bit of top up, using your GCDs heals while you're progging. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think for me, I went into it with like a blind mentality, and then after some pulls and some understanding, I put it into the timeline, and I found that I was trying to save my OGCDs for like certain mechanics. For example, like Harrowing Hell. So I was like, oh, I know it's coming up. I know I can't use my stuff, so I need to save it. And then after looking at a timeline, I realized that hey, actually, I could have used it like way more times than I thought. That this specter of this crazy mechanic was not as scary,
Yeah.
I guess. And there's like way more usages that I could have done. So that really helped me too, putting it into a timeline.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, went back, did the timeline after. I'm like, okay, my cooldown's 2 minutes here, so I can use it here and here, and then, but I can't use it after the meltdown beam, so I can't, like, and just sort of like figure it out. Yeah, there.
Cool. Well, thanks for answering my question.
Thanks for asking it. I would like to invite River. I think that was the next person, so I'm gonna invite you to speak. Hello.
Hi there. I actually have a few questions. I'm a streamer, and some of my community members couldn't make this. And sadly, I'm a brain dead gunbreaker main, so I can't answer any of their healing questions. I'm also the president of the FonceAigle fan club.
So Fonce, this is more a question for Fonce.
Oh, this could be a question for both of you. Well, it's a few. Like I said, I got a little bit of a handful. First off, what would you say is the best healer for a brand new player to the game to learn?
Oh, well, that's pretty easy. I'd definitely say White Mage is by far the simplest. There's very few OGCDs you have to worry about, and there's nothing complicated about its damage at all. So I definitely would say White Mage Arena. It's very simple.
At endgame content rating, what is the main difference between the four healers?
Oh well, I mean that's quite a bit. I
understand. A lot of these are really vague questions my community has asked me to come up here and have egg on my face by asking. So
obviously
they're
divided into pure healers and barrier healers. So so between barrier and pure healers work quite a bit different. But even between the different ones, so like the different White Mage and Astra, for example, Astra is a lot more complicated because of its cards. So it has actually a pretty big DPS rotation during its 2 minutes, for example, while White Mage is very, very simple, with just its presence of mind and inflatus misery. So like you have a lot of differences there, and then like for example, like Astra has a lot more mitigation through his collective unconscious, it's 10%. But White Mage has one, but it's 2 minutes instead, and it's also 10%. So you have that, and then you have like your Sage and Scholar, where like your Scholar's GCD heals is actually a little bit stronger than Sage GCD heals. So like if for whatever reason you play with the Sage and Scholar, which actually is meta for a lot of content, by the way, you usually want your Sage not to GCD heal pretty much ever, unless they absolutely need to, because the Scholar's GCD heal is stronger. I mean, you really shouldn't GCD heal at all, but if you have to, use the Scholar ones instead, because it's a lot stronger in general. Other things like it was mentioned before, Scholar doesn't have any damage neutral spells, and like all the other jobs have damage neutral spells. There's a lot of different stuff. Like it would take quite a bit to go through but that's kind of the basic thing of that.
Okay. The next one I have is written like an Ask Annie, so I'm going to TLDR it. I want to do a lot of damage. What's the right healer for me?
What do you mean? What, like, you want the absolute most damage possible? Is that what you mean by that?
I'm asking on someone else. Big
But
damage.
yeah,
They want to do big
if you
numbers.
want, I mean, if you want the absolute most RDPS damage, you definitely want to. But like I said, you want to play Astro and Scholar. Generally, not all content, but most content, Astro Scholar does the absolute most damage. But that's only the most damage if everyone else is playing
Nice.
correctly.
Yeah.
So, in practice, about over 99%, I would find of groups that would not be the highest damage because people do not play correctly for the most part. So you'll end up doing less with both Astro and Scholar. So,
I got another.
oh,
Oh, sorry.
I was gonna
No,
say,
no, please
so
keep
that
going.
ends up, so in practice, it ends up being White Mage and Sage ends up doing the most damage out of the healer combos.
Physically, yeah.
Uh,
Personally, yeah. Personal. There's a difference when Fonce talks about just our DPS and raw, like, and the other DPS. Sorry, I'm a DPS. Sorry, I was like, oh my god, I forgot the name. And White Mage and Sages are considered like the highest because of their because again, it was talked about Sage's base spell is higher than all the other healers, and White Mage's Misery, when it's aligned with buffs, is very, very high and very, very powerful. Those are personal damage, though. But Sage's and Astrologian, where they bring the biggest bang for your buck, is when everyone does well. With their party buffs, they do way more than a White Mage and Sage, as long as everyone performs. So this is one of the things that they trade off, right? They trade off their personal damage for full party buffs, and by being well known and utilizing those full party buffs, you can have actually meta kill boss time, really speed kills. So speed kills is what we consider sometimes, right? Is it affects everyone's parse by doing a Sage Astrologian combo with healers. They bolster the power party and themselves, and you'll 9 times out of 10 will have a better parse, better damage overall as a team, as a group, and that will equate to a faster kill times no matter the Sage and Scholar combo, which again, personal versus party.
This next person started their question with help, so you know it's going to be a good one. Help, the other healer is being a Chad and only DPSing. How do I get a better parse? I don't know how you answer that one.
Well, first off, you need. I mean, like what Lisa was saying earlier, the first thing, if you can possibly do it, is definitely communicate with the other person. That's going to be your most important step, honestly, because everything else is way less effective than just simply communicating with them about it. So, but if for whatever reason you can't, the next thing would be to look at the logs more deeply and see if you can't cut down heals even more as yourself, and maybe even let the party possibly die so you can get the other person to realize that they need to still use their OGCDs and whatnot, because otherwise you're just going to have people die if neither use it. Like if the other person doesn't use OGCDs and you don't use GCD heals, then it's going to be for a lot of different damage. It's just not going to be enough healing or mitigation, and you're going to die. So
I will personally say that I think most oftentimes, yes, help is like, help, how should I heal more? But look at your ABCs. Is your ABC red? Is your ABC red because you're trying to recover, or is your ABCs red because you yourself is not doing enough, like keeping that GCD rolling? While you can solo heal, and I'm just saying this on a personal level because I had gone through the tier solo healing P12 ones. Going back to it and keeping my ABCs up, I still managed to do a high parse even though I was solo healing. So this is something that you want to kind of consider as well, is going back to your basics. Is my dot up? Is my ABCs up? If I've done all those things correctly, they're in the green, they're good to go, then yes, there's something that looking back at those personal letter prog and personal thing. Yes, and again with Fonce, I'm very different from Fonce in healing. I'm always like, I'm scared that the party dies, so I don't play it that way. If I know that, oh, the part, because of damage variance and gear level, that the party just needs a little bit more help, I will actually switch off and try and heal more and stuff like that, even though my co-healer. So oftentimes I get to this problem in Party Finder where I just end up developing a skill set that relies on solo healing as well. But again, coming from a new healer, that is not like obviously the requirement, but that just is learned through just playing the game and whatnot. But my tip is always just look back at your ABCs and always just look at, am I doing those right? And then what can I do to communicate to the team and the rest of the party? Maybe your co-healer is not doing so well and they're really struggling and they're really, really uncomfortable. That's something that you can still communicate to the rest of the party. Hey, I need a faint heal here. Hey, I need to shake it off. Can you move your shake it off from that to blah, blah, blah? Can you move your dark missionary? So that's something that, again, communication, not just your co-healer is working, but it's a puzzle for everyone to solve. Hey, by the way, during high concept, I can't reach you. Please use your Aegis for Summoner, please use your second wind, all this sort of stuff, because they're just oftentimes it just can be a little bit difficult. But that's just my personal take on it. I do apologize for interrupting, Fonce. But
No, absolutely. No, that's fine. No.
Two very different answers. Fonce, let him die. Elyse, please
Well,
communicate.
it very much depends. It very much depends on static versus PF. PF, you should just do safety. I've definitely done a few Medica 2s in part 2 because mitigation was just so terrible, and I just had to, or we were going to die. And PF is extremely impatient, so you just want to just overheal if you have to, because it doesn't cost that much damage really. But yeah, and now in a more static, then you can do that, but to let your other healer know, like, hey, you need to be using your OGCDs basically.
I don't want to take up too much time, so I'm going to not ask most of my long list of questions. I only got 3 more ones that I think are the best that my community wanted me to make sure that I asked you.
Well, I mean, later you can always ask me, and I'll answer them later, even. So.
yeah.
Oh yeah, that's true. I do hang out with you. Sorry, Brain. What is the biggest mistake you see new healers making?
Oh.
Oh, well, like I said, that's honestly, like I just mentioned in the message before, every single healer I've ever looked at, their GCD uptime is low. Every single healer, and I see them not slide cast much. Like I said, they basically just don't know fundamentals. They don't know that they need to slide cast every single little thing. They need to make sure they're always DPSing as much as possible and never casting GCD heals. I'll see GCD heals, like 20-30 Eucrasian Prognosis or 20-30 Medica 2s, and yeah, so like that's by far the biggest thing, is that healers just don't understand how much damage matters. That even when you don't slide, like I've even tested myself, like slide casting versus no slide casting, you lose over 1,000 DPS. It is very important you learn these. It's like required to learn, not a recommendation, a requirement if you want to succeed in higher content.
I think the biggest thing for me teaching is the mentality of I'm a healer, so I need to heal. And I think that preemptive or preposition of that mentality comes from other games a lot. Oh, what do you play? Oh, I play WoW. And the focus on WoW of healing is I heal and that's it, And so a lot of times these skill sets that are not from other games, like Fonce said, slide casting is not added into that, and so the philosophy of DPSing or adding the DPS has really sort of changed how healing should be approached. And so I find that new healers get into this mentality of, I don't need to DPS, I'm fine. I don't need to work on my ABCs. I don't need to do this and do that. I don't need to keep my dot. Oh, well, my dot fell off for 42 seconds. Well, all the kind of stuff. Or I don't need to contribute. It's, and stuff like that. And so, personally, I feel like that can be... it's very... I won't say this, but that's very hard to work with somebody. If they come in with that mentality and they're not open to... any of those things, it's very hard to play with them. It's very hard to work with. It's just it's like all downhill from there. So it's just changing the mentality that this is not the same game as well. This is not the same requirements. You are caster DPS, but you have additional responsibilities, and that is to heal as well. But while your priority, yes, if things go south, your job is to solely recover the groups. But as part of things when don't go awry, you are still part of the DPS lineup that are pushing the boss, trying to get your team past before the enraged timer hits. You are part of that team. So just always, that's always just my like personal take on why I think new healers always mess that up, is that they just come with a different mentality.
Fonce, can you say that emote tip out loud just for the recording?
Oh yeah, yeah. I even used it when I was first, because that was one of the things I was learning from WoW to 14. Because you don't slide cast at all in WoW. Was that's what I used to practice, was always put an emote next to my bar, and when you're casting, it does its grayed out essentially. As soon as it lights up, you can start moving, and that slide cast starts as long as the cast isn't longer than the your recast. But that's almost all cast for healers essentially. But at 0.5 seconds is affected by your ping. 0.5 seconds of the cast, you can start slide casting.
Yep, sorry, go ahead.
This one is mostly about attitude and mindset. I consider, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not a healer, so this isn't me. I feel like I'm the worst member of my static. There's a lot that I seem to always have to do with healing, and I get really anxious about it. How do I deal with that healer anxiety?
Like honestly, because it's very simple. But honestly, probably the best is just practice more. I know it's like, oh really, but yeah, like honestly, practicing more and getting used to heals over and over of a fight, especially a specific fight. You keep doing like I said, like I mean, even like whenever people deal with fears in general, that's how you usually deal with it. You deal with it over time, slowly, like oh, here's a picture of this, and you actually see the real thing, type of deal. So that's how like people deal with fears even in other things. But like in game, for example, when you're dealing with healer anxiety, yeah, just practicing the same thing over and over again, you'll eventually, I find most people will have their anxiety much lessened and completely removed over time if they just practice the same thing.
Okay.
I second that 100%. I work with practicing. I just threw myself in there when I first started healing. After that guy told me I was like the worst healer ever, I was just like, no, I'm gonna prove him wrong, and then I just threw myself in there. However, I think and this is talking from like IRL life, is how do you know yourself as a individual when dealing with anxiety and stuff like that? How do you go across your like normal life and deal with that, right? And in performing and stuff like that. And often that I attest to is like I play piano, right? And a lot of anxiety comes from performance anxiety and stuff like that. So I have a routine, right? And this is not going to work for everybody, but knowing you and yourself and knowing how you cope and handle the anxiety within yourself is something that you will know the best for, and you will know how to manage that yourself, and that just takes your lifetime to figure that nuance out, and only you can do it. Unfortunately, we can give you tidbits like throw yourself into PF, do some deep breathing, have some affirmations, but at the end of the day, it's all based on how you feel, how you handle it, and what works best for you. And just oftentimes my coach in basketball would say like, hey, find a routine, get you used to it, and stick with it, and it'll help a lot with having those things within your control. But yeah, that's just not healer, but extra life tips, I guess.
Yeah, tips from life from the healers. I got this question like 5 times, and there's no way you can answer it without like making a whole nother seminar for it. So it's generally asking about like what a hotbar should look like, what settings that people should have before going into raid. Would the both of you be able to screenshot what your hotbars and settings generally look like, so this way people looking for just somewhere to start? And I know personally it's really personalized for like whatever's comfortable for you, but a lot of people like need a place to start before they start, customizing it for what feels good for them.
I play on controller, and I know that Fonce plays on keyboard, so yeah, we can definitely do that. But I also have an additional hotbar for cooldown timings, so that even if I can't see it, I have it there. And I'm streaming right now, but I have like everything is just kind of set out how I like to have it set out, and it's also trial and error. I don't like that there, and then I'll just move it, it's not coming from me, it doesn't feel natural, right? And so I just move it here. So yeah, I'm a controller player, so can't really too much say that.
Actually, few people in my community were asking questions about controllers as well, so screenshots of that hotbar would be great for them.
Sure, I can just quickly. I don't know
if
what
both of you do it, just go through healer, screenshot everything, and then I can finally just be like, no, look at this. Stop asking me. The last question I have, and then I'm going to shut up forever. How do you know when you're ready for savages? And from there, how do you know when you're ready for ultimates?
Oh, that's a bit more complicated. It really just comes down to you personally, honestly. Like, because like I said, each person is very much different. But I would say personally, like, for like if you're ready for like savages, like, do you know the very fundamentals, like, or at least you kind of are aware of it. You don't have to like master them or anything, but are you aware of the fundamentals of slide casting? Like trying to cut down on GCD heals, like knowing where to place your cooldowns. Kind of like you look at damage like, oh, I need to place some mitigation here, or once you kind of have that kind of fundamental of you're being aware of that, I feel like you're ready to go into savage. Now, ultimates, on the other hand, I would feel at that point, I would say you need to kind of start mastering them at that point, especially once you get to your current ultimates like DSR and top. You really need to master those fundamentals and master, like I said, the slide casting, the knowing exactly where to put your heals, and like I said, for DSR and top, I'd recommend like I've mentioned before, but knowing exactly how much damage stuff does, so like especially if you're playing a barrier healer, you know exactly how much mitigation you need to put, because if you put too much mitigation, you won't have something for else, and your whole team will wipe. So you really need to make sure once you especially start doing those current ultimates, you know exactly how much stuff does, so
I guess
you know how much mitigation.
I want to build on that before Elyse answers real quick. Where would they find that information?
Well, I have like mit sheets that is recommended for that. Now, damage, unfortunately, people don't typically post like how much exactly. So you'll have to go through logs and go. You can either like click resource and look how much damage people are taking for a particular hit and see if you. That's what I've done, for example, like when I was doing DSR and we kept dying to a raid wide that just kept straight up killing us, and I'd look at resource and look exactly how much damage. Like, oh, I'm actually within the variance that I'll die sometimes, so I need to use a little bit more here. And then I had to tell my whole entire staff, oh, I need to use holos here now, unfortunately, so I can't use it for the next mechanic. So can we have mitigation for the next mechanic, make sure we don't die to that, so.
I think in terms of ready, I don't feel like I was always ready. I still don't feel like that even until like now playing for like 5 raid tiers and 3 ultimates. My thing is, I think trial yourself. Go to how are you feeling on dungeons? How are you feeling on extremes? And getting comfortable on old extremes. Can you solo heal those? Can you and keep your DPS up? And then just sort of take it day by day, take by stages. Do those extremes. Now do current level extremes. Try and min max and optimize and stuff like that. And then go into savages. I mean, personally, people jump into savages and ultimates and do perfectly fine. That's them, and it's really, again, with Fonce, when Fonce is like, it kind of depends on the person. It really does. Like the guy I taught somebody who wanted to start savages and ultimates, and he just hopped into there, and I was just like, okay, good on you. And he just worked hard. He tried, and he was a penta legend. Like literally, I only like had to like talk to him for like once or twice, and he just went full board on it and stuff like that. So was he ready? Oh, absolutely. He just put the work and stuff like that into it and whatnot, and so it just was one of those things where it's just so dependent on you. I'm so sorry. Anyways, go ahead.
Oh, that's everything. So thank you guys both so much for answering questions on behalf of my community and the FonceAigle fan club. The recording will be up somewhere, so I can link it to people later.
Thank you so much. Sorry.
What? You did do a recording, yeah?
I did personally, but
Okay.
people can record. I welcome that too.
Well, he needs a recording.
I
for
need
his-
the recording to send
Oh!
to the people who couldn't be here today that wanted me to ask all
Oh.
these questions.
Yes, I can definitely send the recording to
Excellent.
post it, and it would be on my Twitch stream as well. So it's just gonna be, yeah.
Thank you both very, very much then for answering all the questions. The last one I have is just to embarrass you, Fonce.
Damn.
You single?
What?
Okay, we're gonna. But thank you so much, River, for the invite. Watch. I hope they're here. Hi.
Oh, my question is probably pretty stupid.
No. Stop.
As you know, I have massive DPS main brain rot, but I want to get more into healing. What's a good tip that you would give someone so they remember there's a healer when they're in content? That's my biggest issue with healing. Half the time I forget I'm a healer, and then I see someone die, and then I'm like, oh, right, so where's the heals? And then I look down at my hotbar. Oh, I have Cure Free there. I'm the healer.
I personally don't know that answer because I've always healed, I guess. I'd say maybe do a mantra. I'm the healer, I'm the healer, I'm the healer. I have to take care of people. I don't know. That one's a hard one. I can't really. I'm not a DPS main, unfortunately, so I'm just. Like,
I wouldn't know what other than like I mean if you're pressing your one DPS button that's how you know if your DPS is really simple, you're probably playing a healer. I don't know because I mainly
I know,
I don't
like
play.
it's a role I want to get more into, but I've noticed, especially with teaching some parties here, when I go into healer in like 9, for example, half the time I just forget I'm a healer and like let 4 people die to the first raid wise.
Yeah, I can kind of understand it because like whenever I go to DPS, I'll forget. I'll go into support spot like, oh shoot, I forgot I was DPS. No, I went to the wrong spot. Yeah, and if like and how I learned, eventually like for para 3, because I did that a lot. But if you play DPS enough, then you'll actually get into the kind of muscle memory that you're a DPS. So vice versa for heals instead. But yeah.
I have an opposite problem. If I play DPS and I notice that we're gonna die to heal, I'm like, oh, we're gonna die. Oh my god, we're gonna die. And I hit all my personal cooldowns, like second wind, bloodbath, and Aegis. I'm like, oh god, we're gonna die. And I pay attention to. I play as a DPS. I pay attention to even though I'm doing my rotation, I see somebody in the corner in the wrong spot, and I'm like, they're gonna die. And then I just oh shit, I have to DPS, and then kind of forgets that I'm a DPS, and I lose my loop rotation on Samurai. So I was just like, fuck. I have the opposite problem where I'm paying attention to what's going on, and I'm like, oh, that tank doesn't have any mits, they're dead. And I'm like, oh wait, I missed my Higabana, and I'm just like, fuck. So I have the opposite problem, is that I forget that I am a DPS, and I don't know. Maybe you can give me some tips on how to remember to be a DPS.
I can try.
So what is your tip?
I need to think about it to answer you because I'm literally asking this in the middle of some content right now.
Okay.
I'm in the middle. I'm in the middle of porting Unreal while asking this question, so my brain is kind of in 4 different places at once.
Oh, no worries, no worries.
Oh yeah, understandable. Unreal. Yeah, you get the AFK a lot.
Oh my god. But yeah, do you have any other further questions?
Was my only question.
Thank you so much. It wasn't a silly question. It's just something that I personally... People transition to DPS or tank into healer as well, so...
Yeah, it was an excellent question. It wasn't even silly. It was an excellent question.
Yeah, so unfortunately I don't have the answer.
Oh, it's all good.
You just get comfortable with a main and you main something for so long, you just forget how to do the opposite, and so that just happens. Yeah. Anyways, I'm going to invite the next person.
And you can just remove me because, like I said, I'm a bit preoccupied right now.
Move to audience. Thank you. Sorry, I'm not used to this power. Hello, Aki.
Sorry, I was muted. Hello.
Hello. Hi. How's it going?
Pretty good. I have a question. So I've only ever healed, well, I mean, obviously I had to get here, but most of the time just at level 90, okay? So what is the main difference between healing current content and then like going back to like older content, for example, like Uwu or Ukab or something like that? Like, what's the main difference when you're going back like that, when you're already used to like current level content and that's it?
Fonce, you want to answer that one?
Oh, well, yeah. At first, when you had said older content, I thought you meant like level, the much easier, like level 80, level 70 savages, for example. But now you're talking about ultimates. That's quite a bit different. But so in ultimates, it depends on what Uwu, as you mentioned, is level 70, so you have a lot less options. Especially like since you play white mage, you have a lot less options. You don't have temperance. You do have like your solace, I believe. Yeah, and you can't even really use it to heal because because you don't have a Flatus Misery anymore. It ends up not being a damage neutral heal. It ends up basically being a GCD heal straight up because it actually costs you damage. So like when I play white mage, I tend to not use lilies at all during Uwu, for example. So you need to keep that in mind. Although it's still useful, like if you need to GCD heal, it should be your go-to single target GCD heal because it doesn't cost mana. There's other little differences like you have a lot less healing options. So a lot of times you'll end up either like you'll cast like Medica 2 during like if you're taking a bunch of damage during Garuda phase, but for the most part you're going to be casting because people are stacked up and it's your most efficient quick heal Cure 3. You're going to be casting a lot more Cure 3s, and remember that you can target a person with Cure 3 and heal them all in that as long as they're stacked within that where you cast it, for example.
I think the DPS,
Right.
I think being in Shadowbringer, Uwu and Ukab is definitely not lenient on the DPS check, right? Definitely, while this we have progressed into Endwalker, it's changed quite a bit. When it was current content, it was very, very difficult to. It was also important to keep your DPS up, right? It is very. Things have also changed. So I did T when it was in Shadowbringer, and the healing was very. I would say the stat squish screwed it up a lot, especially in BJ and CC. And again, I don't know if that's going to change in Endwalker with the stat squish, but I'm just going to give you an example. In Shadowbringer, in BJ and CC, in T, tanks had a health pool of nearly 200k, like very, very high. Where BJ and CC's autos, it would just be like 22k, like very like little like taps essentially from the boss's autos. Now going back into Endwalker and doing T, the BJ will auto a tank for 4 times and they just die, right? So the healing in BJ and CC and T has changed dramatically. It was a lot harder in Endwalker on a personal level. I think that it was a lot easier to heal T in Shadowbringer as well, and stuff like that. Just because of the stat squish difference. I did not do obviously the other fights DSR and top yet. I'm gonna work on those, but and I don't know what the difference is. But long story short, it's changed quite a bit, and I think it just will continue to change, unfortunately. So, but that's the biggest difference in terms of healing and ultimates and stuff.
Yeah, like that now in T with BJCC, for example, like like when I play Sage, to make sure you're not actually GCD healing the tank, you can actually use your party wide mitigation that you normally would use for the entire party, but you're actually only using it for the tanks. Like I literally just use Panheimer, for example, almost entirely just for the tanks, just so they don't die,
So they don't
and that
die
way I
to
don't have to.
autos.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, because it really does hit very hard on tanks now.
Yeah, 4 autos and they're like dead, and you're like, wow, that didn't happen in before, but now I guess it's something I gotta account for. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Do you have any other questions?
Not that I can think of, but you both did a great job, and thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you, Aki. it looks like everyone doesn't have any more questions. Unless speak now or forever hold your peace. Oh, never mind. I say something. Hello,
You shouldn't
Senna.
have said anything.
Hi, Senna.
Hi, Elyse. Hi, Fonce. I have a question that might come up once in a while. You kind of touched upon it earlier, but how would you suggest people deal with healer abuse? Because as we know, healers kind of deal with the brunt of mistakes and blame in parties.
With facts. No, I actually had this recently in P12S, and I was just helping a group, and I wasn't the healer, but the tank took the P12S tank buster without any mitts, and I went to the battle log and I just copied and pasted the battle log, so it took 121k damage, and then I pasted that in party because I just felt like the tank was belittling on the healers a lot in Party Finder, and even though I was in it, I was just like, my heart always goes out to healers, and I'm just like, actually, it just looks like you haven't mitigated, and then I just put that, because you can't lie about that, right, and just with facts. Here's a fact. You took that tank buster unmitigated. So, that's it. I mean, that's how I personally deal with it, and I wasn't even a healer in the P12 party. I just felt like there was some accusation going on, and I just wanted to be like, hey, this is not quite what it is, but that's how I personally deal with the healer blame.
Yeah, I definitely would say facts for sure. Definitely look at your personal thing to see if you can do anything better. And if you can't, then that's all you can do. I mean, there's just people sometimes in PF that just having a bad day or whatever, and they're just going to start playing the blame game constantly. And healers are usually the target of it. So there's not a whole lot you can do to change people's perspective sometimes. So you kind of just have to unfortunately just take it for the most. I mean, you can obviously should argue your position, but after a certain point, just kind of let it go and just you realize they're just having a bad day. But as long as you're doing everything you can, you did you're supposed to, then you shouldn't worry about it too much because you're doing everything correctly.
Yeah,
And they'll have to deal with eventually with the reality of that they're actually not dealing with stuff correctly.
yeah, and that comes with confidence and over time, right? I would say that I would never say anything. If somebody blamed me in party tag, I would just be super quiet, and then I'll just leave. I'll silently leave because I just was like, maybe I'm doing it, and then over time I just was I got quite being fast at knowing what those damage are and looking at that battle log a lot, and then just being able to quickly be like, okay, it wasn't a healing issue, and kind of work backwards towards that. So, but that just me. It'll come with confidence to deal with that. But yeah, I usually just was like, I don't want to fight with any of you because first off, I don't know any of you, and also I'll take the blame for now, and then I usually just say see you later, and then back away, and then go back into logs because I do beat myself up a little bit if I think it's my fault, but then I look back in the logs and see how I can improve, and I'm being like, oh, it wasn't my fault, and then and then just kind of work at it like that. If that makes any sense, but.
Would you say that's part of the skill set then, is knowing when to fight and when to kind of just leave?
I think with that being said, try to talk it out with facts, but if they're not agreeable, like Fonce said, they're having a bad day, and oftentimes when that happens, you see that people become keyboard warriors and they get really out on somebody and stuff like that. And I usually try and say can we keep the peace? And if we're not, I'm leaving. You definitely remove yourself from the situation because then it's very taxing to be in that sort of situation mentally.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I was gonna say it.
emotionally.
I was gonna add, yeah, it definitely comes down to personal preference. Some people can take it and it'll be, you can kind of just deal with it and just move on. Other people, it just makes you super anxious, and that's totally fine too if you want to leave. No one would blame you. Obviously, if you want to just straight up just leave. Like I said, it just kind of depends on what you want to do personally in that situation. And like I said, there's no really right or wrong. I mean, maybe the only wrong answer would be fanning the flames. Don't do that. But other than that, there's no really right or wrong answer.
you get a skill set on like how you personally want to handle conflict and stuff like that, and you on your level and stuff like that, and however you want to handle it, as long as it's good, like as long as it's not hurting other people, right? Just sort of like try and move on without like being respectful, right? So, to you yourself and to others. It's just see that's common sense, but then I feel like it's not, so just like throwing it out there. I'm whispering because I just don't want to be like I mean, this is a recording, so I'm just like I'm gonna get hung for like saying like, hey, just like chill out there, you know, just keep it all together. But yeah, people just yell because stuff is going on in IRL, or they're just not happy people, you know, and that's just something that I don't want to talk too much about my personal life, but like I work at a place where people are vulnerable and stuff like that, so oftentimes like it's more like I have to try and like reflect and be mindful of what's going on in my life so that I don't exert it on my like clients and patients and all that kind of stuff. So it's just like those kind of things that they'll just come. Yeah. Yay! Good question.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your answer.
Yeah. Okay. I think that unless somebody has another thing, we thank you everyone for staying. You've been wonderful. But if anyone has any further questions, we would like to end the session and recording here, and whatnot, and then just leave it up for. But thank you everyone for coming and listening and giving people's input in chat. You've been wonderful. And I'm sorry about the presentation. I did have a little slide for slide casting. I don't know what happened. It deleted, and so I was just like, oh shoot. So I had to like kind of improvise, but yeah.
Yeah, about the Slack cast. Yeah, definitely ask questions. Part, you know, and in DMs, I definitely want to open the DMs, especially healer questions. I'll answer in your healer questions. But yeah, Slack. So yeah, if you want to ask about Slack casting later, that's totally because it's very, very important. So yeah.
All right. Without further, I'm gonna say her name. Without ado, I will see you all next time, and hopefully, again, my DMs are open for questions, comments, concerns, and I'm always learning. So, yeah, she did it on purpose. I didn't do it on purpose.